Hi everybody, let me tell you a new story today. My surname is Lee. Of course, this is not my story. I used to be a small contractor around the year 2000 during the peak of infrastructure construction. I traveled through many provinces and cities with my construction team. I didn't have much education and I didn't travel around to broaden my horizons. I did it just for the money. There were some places where we worked that I didn't even know where they were on the map until I left. In the countryside, while laying foundations, it's usually just digging 1 or 2 meters deep and building 2 or 3 stories. It's not like that in the city. The big bosses want the buildings to be very tall. So naturally, the soil has to be dug much deeper. No one knows what has happened on some of the lands in the past. So after digging, some places will unearth things that are hard to explain. Workers like to chat, and I would also spread these stories I heard here and there just for fun. But no matter how much I drank, there was one thing I myself experienced that I never mentioned. It involves some people's secrets, and it's not convenient for me to talk about it. After 2016, it became difficult to do business with a small construction team, so I exited the industry. Now I want to tell this story through Alex, through me. I won't specify the location or names, including my own. When this happened, I had already been in the business for 4 or 5 years and had some stable clients and workers. At that time, I was working for a boss surnamed Huang. Once at a drinking table, he told me that he wanted to borrow 2 people from my construction team, and he even named them especially. I was a bit drunk at the time, but my years of experience in the industry sobered me up a bit. As a small contractor like us, like me, we're holding the bosses above and the workers below. If every boss bypasses me and directly funds my workers, what would be left for me? I couldn't refuse directly, so I said that these 2 people had just started working and their skills were not very good. If there was anything, it would be better to talk to me directly. Boss Huang said he had no other intentions. It was just that another construction site was short of workers, and the foreman hoped to borrow 2. He chose 2 young workers from my team just for a few days, and he didn't mean to cause me any trouble. He even toasted me, and since I couldn't go against his wishes, so I agreed. The next day, after sobering up, I told my cousin about this. My cousin had been working with me for many years and was my assistant. After hearing this, he said this matter was not good. The workers were with me. If Boss Huang took them away and something happened, I would still be responsible. Moreover, the 2 he chose were young workers who had just joined the team. Logically, they don't have any strength that would catch Boss Huang's eye. It was strange that Boss Huang noticed them in the first place. After my cousin pointed this out, I also felt worried and regretted agreeing to it yesterday. But since I had already promised, I thought for a long time and could only come up with 2 solutions. The first was to let these 2 young workers refuse themselves One of them was surnamed Gong, and the other was named Chuan. Gong had been with me a bit longer and was a bit older and more experienced than Chuan. I decided to work on Gong. I told them that now both one especially wanted to borrow them, which was their fortune, as they would have the opportunity to meet bigger bosses. But I said I didn't know where that construction site was, and since they were not familiar with it, if something happened, I was afraid I wouldn't be able to take care of them. However, good days are made by taking risks, and I hoped they could be brave. If there were any real difficulties, they should tell me now. Gong might have thought I wanted to kick him out of the team. He reacted strongly, saying that no matter what big boss it was, I was his real boss, and he only wanted to work with me, not go anywhere else. Chuan also echoed him, and I was quite satisfied. I said I couldn't block their way up, and I would take them to meet Boss Huang. Then they could refuse by themselves. In the afternoon, I took them to meet Boss Huang. Gong said that he and Chuan were both new and had limited abilities. They were afraid of delaying things and couldn't account to Boss Huang, nor could they bring shame to their own boss. Boss Huang didn't explain much and just quoted a price, planning for 5 days. If it exceeded this number of days, he would pay more. When I heard this price, I knew I couldn't stop them. If I just refused to let them go, Gong and Chuan would definitely resent me. I could only express my support for the two young workers to earn more money on the spot. Saying that I agreed, they accepted. Boss Huang asked me to take them back to the dormitory first, to pack up their things simply. Later, he would send someone to pick them up. The first method failed, so I had to use the second, more passive approach. I found Gong alone and gave him an old mobile phone. This phone was one I had replaced last month, which I originally planned to give it to my parents back home. Now, to keep in touch with the two of them, I could only lend this mobile phone to Gong first. I told Gong to call me if he needed to, not to use this phone indiscriminately, especially not in front of Boss Huang. Also, don't let Chuan see it. Both Boss Huang and Chuan knew this phone was mine. Gong didn't ask anything and agreed directly. I was quite satisfied with this. In the evening, a sedan came and took Gong and Chuan away. I watched them leave, feeling both regretful and nervous. But things had come to this, and I could only hope that the phone would be useful. On the third evening, I finally received a call from Gong. He said that he and Chuan were now staying in a hotel, and their food and necessities were taken care of. Yesterday, Boss Huang had even taken them out for a meal. At the table, they specially introduced them to an old man, saying that they should listen to this old man in the future, not ask too many questions, and not talk too much afterward. If they did a good job, they would receive cash wages daily. If not, they would be dismissed and wouldn't even have to return to the construction site. I asked him how many people were at the dinner. He said that including Boss Huang, his secretary at job, and the old man, there were 7 people in total. I was even more confused. That means Boss Huang had found 4 workers in total. If it was just for ordinary workers, the money offered was too much. Why did they even have a dinner? I felt even more uneasy. The more I thought about it, the stranger it seemed. Gong said that they were not allowed to go out these days. He mentioned the name of the hotel, which I had never heard of. He also mentioned the name of the restaurant where they had dinner. It was a local restaurant that Boss Huan had also taken me to, which meant they were still in this city. I felt a bit relieved and told Gong again to be smart and contact me more often if possible. On the morning of the fifth day, at around 7 o'clock, Gong called. He seemed to have suffered a great mental shock and was speaking incoherently. It took me a long time to understand what he was saying. He said, "Last night at 9 o'clock, Secretary Zhao suddenly came to phone me, saying that we would start work tonight and asked me to go downstairs to the car in 20 minutes. They had never mentioned that we should start work at night before, and I didn't ask any questions. We were all staying in single rooms, and I wasn't with Chuan, so I couldn't discuss it with him. After I went downstairs, there was an SUV waiting there. There were 5 people in a car: Secretary Zhao, the old man, and the other 3 workers. Everyone from the banquet that day was there except Boss Huan. The old man took out 4 sets of clothes in different colors. Each of the 4 workers got 1 set and was asked to change before getting out of the car. The clothes had strange patterns that I couldn't describe. I usually lived and worked on a construction site, and I didn't know where the car was going. When we arrived at a place and the car stopped, I thought it was time to get out, but Secretary Zhao said to wait. Then he took 1 worker out of the car. The 2 of them were gone for about 4 or 5 minutes before Secretary Zhao came back, and the car started again. After a while, the car stopped again, and he took another person out. I was the 3rd one. Secretary Zhao took me to the door of a shed, which looked like a restroom on a construction site. But the corrugated board was sprayed with some symbols that I couldn't understand. I was a bit scared and didn't dare to go in. Secretary Zhao handed me an envelope and said that there was food and drink inside, a bed, and that I could urinate into a mineral water bottle. No matter what sound I heard, I shouldn't make a fuss, make noise, or leave the room. I was not allowed to take off my clothes. He would come to pick me up early the next morning. I touched the envelope contained some cash, and had no choice but to go in. The shed was quite clean, with food, drink, a bed, and a window with bars, but it was too dark outside to see anything. I pushed the door and found that it was already locked from outside. I was quite scared, and I wanted to call you, but then I realized that I had forgotten to take the phone out when I changed clothes. I didn't know what time it was, but I guess it must be the middle of the night. At first, there was indeed nothing unusual. Later, I heard a lot of footsteps outside, as if some people had come, but they were not near the window, so I couldn't see them. Then the surroundings began to clump and clump, and I knew it was the sound of digging soil, but it was done very quickly. I couldn't figure out why they didn't let me go out to work and instead locked me in a room. However, apart from being scared, it didn't harm me in any way. Later on, I felt something was wrong. First, I didn't hear the sound of an excavator at all from beginning to end. It was all done by workers digging the ground. Second, it was pitch black outside the window, with no lights on the construction site. Not even a glimmer of a reflection. It was completely dark. Third, these workers digging the soil never rested, as if they had endless strength. I didn't hear anyone talking, nor did I hear anyone directing or whistling to take a break. I had been on the construction site for almost 2 years, and I felt that this whole situation was very strange. I was originally just hanging out in a hotel these days with nothing to do but watch TV and sleep. So I was quite energetic and could stay up all night. However, the sound of digging was so rhythmic that I began to feel sleepy after listening for a while. And finally, I couldn't bear it and fell asleep. I don't know how long I slept. It was Secretary Joe who woke me up, telling me to get in the car with him. When I came out of the shed, I found that it was still no light, still dark. The old man, Chuan, and another worker were already in a car. Secretary Joe asked me to change my clothes back. After picking up everybody, we returned to the hotel. This is the end of Gong's story. After listening to Gong's story, I roughly guessed where they were. They were likely on this construction site, especially in a northwest corner, which is an open area. We received a message yesterday saying that in order to catch up with the work, another construction team was brought in to work at night. We were told not to be surprised by the noise at night and to stay in the shed and rest well without going out and disrupting the production order. I did hear the sound of the construction from the northwest corner last night. It was a bit far away, and the sound wasn't very loud, but I was sure I didn't hear it wrong. The construction progress in the northwest corner was far behind the other areas. It was said that after the first day of work, it was surrounded by blue panels. Why? We don't know. Everyone discussed it for a few days, but no one could dig out any news. So we stopped investigating. What Gong said seemed to match up with that area. I comforted Gong, telling him not to be too nervous, that there was nothing serious, and that he should be happy to earn money by just sleeping. Then I told him to follow their arrangements and come back as soon as the work was done. I felt that something must have happened in the northwest corner, and Gong and Chuan were involved in it. This was Boss Huang's business, and he was hiding it from me, not wanting me to know. I also understood that curiosity could kill the cat. If these two young workers were just scared and nothing else happened, I wouldn't bother to investigate, but I never expected that I would still get involved. At around 2 or 3 in the morning on the seventh day, I was waken up by the ringtone of my mobile phone. I answered it drowsily, and it was Secretary Joe. He got straight to the point and asked me, "Do you know about the locked door in the northwest corner of the construction site?" I said yes. He said, "The door is now open. You need to go inside that door right away and find him. The worker named Gong under my command is not following orders and is causing trouble. Come quickly." I got up and started to get dressed. Before I could even pull up my pants, I received another call from Gong. Gong was panting heavily and said, "They said today is the last day. Similar to the previous days, I went to the shed and slept. Secretary Joe told me to get up and get in the car. When I got to the front of the car, I felt something was wrong. There was always several people in the car before, but today the car was empty except for Secretary Joe. I asked him, "Where is Chuan?" He said Chuan was waiting for me at the entrance. I was half convinced and half doubtful. As I walked to the car door and was about to get in, I saw a lot of blood on his arm and a light from the top of the car. I was very scared and didn't dare to get in. I asked him why there was so much blood on his arm. He hesitated and couldn't explain clearly. Then he forced me to get in a car. I felt something was wrong, so I turned around and ran. Joe didn't catch me up with me. I was very scared, and I didn't know where I was. In summary, Gong thought that Chuan might have been harmed, and his own safety was also threatened. I comforted Gong, telling him not to worry, that I would come to rescue him right away, and asked him not to run around. I grabbed a powerful flashlight by the door, went out, and rode my motorcycle to the place Joe mentioned. On the way, I was a bit hesitant in my mind. There was a conflict in what the two of them said. Secretary Joe said Gong was causing trouble, while Gong said Secretary Joe wanted to harm him and had already harmed Chuan. I didn't really believe that Chuan had been harmed. Chuan was not worth anyone going to the trouble of harming him. Boss Huang was in legitimate business. He had a family and a career. No matter what, he wouldn't arrange for his secretary to commit murder. But Gong had always been honest and obedient. There must be a reason for what he said. At least Secretary Joe had blood on his arm, and Gong could identify that. I wanted to make some preparations in advance. But before I could think of anything, I had already arrived. I could only improvise. I parked the motorcycle at the entrance and ran in. In the early morning, it was still pitch black. There were two beams of light far away, which should have been from Secretary Joe's car. In the night, something was gleaming green. I walked up and saw it was a shed, which should be where the workers stayed. The green light was from a luminous paint, sprayed on the surface of the shed in lines, which should be the symbol Gong mentioned. I couldn't see the whole picture, and of course, even if I could, I couldn't understand it. The door of the shed was open, and there was no one inside. I didn't want to turn on a flashlight too early, as that would reveal my position. The information from the two phone calls just now didn't make me feel very secure. I wanted to move forward as much as possible in the dark, but I didn't expect to trip after just a few steps. As I fell, I realized there was a big pit in front of me. Fortunately, I reacted quickly, grabbed the edge with my hand, and pulled myself up. I remembered what Gong said about people digging, so I guessed this pit was what they had dug. I didn't know how many more pits there were here. I was still at a loss when my phone vibrated and startled me. I took out my phone and pressed the answer button. Secretary Joe said, "Brother Lee, why haven't you come yet? I've cornered Gong in the northwest corner. Come quickly and help me. He is very agitated now. If you don't come soon, both of us will be done for." I knew I needed to get there quickly. I turned on a powerful flashlight and, with its help, saw the pit in front of me. It was about 2 meters long, half a meter wide, and quite deep. This was clearly not a pit for laying foundations. I really couldn't figure out what the purpose of digging this size was. I also shone the flashlight around and found two more pits of a similar size. They were arranged very loosely, with no particular interval, as if they had been dug randomly. I didn't have time to think it through. I heard someone calling my name faintly. The person must be seeing the flashlight. I ran towards the direction of the sound. On the way, I saw more pits of a similar size. After running about 300 meters, I saw Secretary Zhao and Gong finally, who was a few meters away from him, holding a pickaxe. I didn't know who to greet first. Gong spoke first. Uncle Li, these people are not good. They want to harm me. You have to save me. Secretary Zhao looked at me with a wry smile and said, Brother Li, you should calm Gong down. He's misunderstood. Gong said, Uncle Li, you come over here and see for yourself. Look at what's on the ground. Once you see it, you know I'm not lying. Secretary Zhao's expression became a bit tense. He advised me not to look, but the more he said that, the more suspicious I became. I walked over to Gong and shone the flashlight on the ground. As the light swept over, I almost jumped in fright. There were rows and rows of people lying on the ground, each wearing a cotton hat and a bright red military coat, lying there stiffly. I had never seen such a bizarre scene. I didn't dare to look closely at their faces. It took only a moment for the fear to overwhelm me and leave my mind blank. Although it was a bit embarrassing, I was truly petrified. It wasn't until Gong called my name that I was brought back to reality. I calmed down for a moment and then turned the flashlight on Secretary Zhao. My idea was to use the strong light to control Zhao while Gong and I took the opportunity to run and call the police. Zhao was caught off guard and buried his face in his arm from the bright light, only able to shout at me to take a closer look at what was lying on the ground again. He said they weren't real people. I glanced at Gong, who looked a bit embarrassed and said, What's on the ground isn't real people. I had no choice but to take another close look at what was lying on the ground. They were all straw dummies. Only then did Zhao agree to explain the whole story to us. There were indeed something here that couldn't be spread around. But since he had called me over, he didn't plan to keep it from me. Gong still had a lot of suspicion. He said it would be better to trust the pickaxe in his hand than Zhao. I had no choice but to go over myself and listen to Zhao's explanation. I believed in ghosts and deities, but the story Zhao told was hard for me to believe. At the beginning of the construction, the northwest corner was the first place to start work. But for some reason, the excavator couldn't dig into the soil. Every time it tried to scoop some up, it could only scrape off a little bit. Boss Huang, who had been in business for a long time and had more experience, went to invite a master immediately he had been working with for a long time. The master took a look and said that this was an old mass grave. The people buried beneath had too much resentment and wouldn't allow the construction team to demolish their homes. so the work couldn't start. The master said he could communicate with these deceased people, offering them some benefits and ask them to move aside. Boss Huang just needed to have someone take out their remains and relocate them. Boss Huang was reluctant because having people come to dig would inevitably leak the news. He planned to build residential buildings here in the future, and no one would want to live on top of a massive grave. He asked the master to think of another way to handle it more discreetly. The master then came up with a rather bizarre idea. He planned to have these spirits dig out their own remains. What Boss Huan needed to do was prepare 50 straw dummies that the spirits could attach themselves to. These puppies had to be imbued with enough life energy from living beings. Therefore, the straw dummies had to be soaked in animal blood. Additionally, he needed to find 4 young people born in June with strong life energy to set up the ritual area. Boss Huang, who was rather cautious, was worried that if someone stumbled upon the scene, seeing a bunch of straw figures running around at night would ruin his business. He wanted the straw figures to look more human, at least not easily distinguishable from a distance. Zhao came up with the idea of dressing these straw figures in clothes. Since the figures had different body shapes from humans, they decided to dress them all in military coats, which would cover their original figures and help conceal the operation in the dark. The master said that if they were to dress the figures, the clothes also had to be soaked in animal blood. In this way, Boss Huang, the master, and Secretary Zhao came up with a plan together. The only uncontrollable factor here was the 4 young people. To prevent them from saying what was happening, they prepared 4 sheds to keep them inside, so they wouldn't know anything. The operation had been going smoothly until the last day, but as the ritual was about to end, the master suddenly asked Secretary Zhou to check on Chuan's position. When Secretary Zhou arrived, he found Chuan lying not far from his shed, with blood flowing incessantly from his nose. The blood on his clothes was from that moment. Chuan was still conscious at that time. He said that he had always been curious about what was happening outside and couldn't resist the urge to take a look on the last day. He didn't expect to actually push the door open. Zhao forgot to lock it. As soon as he went out, he felt a great pressure and collapsed after taking just a few steps. Zhao gave Chuan emergency treatment and then took him to the master for further handling. He is now out of serious danger. What Zhao didn't expect was that Gong's spirit was also on the brink of collapse. Stimulated by the blood on him, Gong actually refused to get in the car. After weighing the situation, Zhao had no choice but to call me and hope that the matter wouldn't escalate further. After hearing the whole story, I don't know what to say. While my worldview was profoundly altered, I was also thinking about how to protect my own interest. Gong and Chuan were my people, although they were borrowed. What they did had nothing to do with me, but they did cause trouble for Boss Huang. Chuan walked out of the shed, and Gong refused to get in the car. Boss Huang would more or less blame me for not educating my workers properly. But if I really punished these two, they would not only lose face but also be difficult to manage in the future. Before I could say anything, Zhao spoke up. He suggested a simple solution. We all pretend that nothing had happened today. We wouldn't tell Boss Huang about it. I would do my job well under my command, and he would take care of the rest. I didn't have a better idea either. After a brief exchange with Zhao, I went to calm Gong down. While talking to him, I couldn't help but look at the row of straw dummies lying on the ground, their blood-soaked military coats with a bright red hue are still etched in my mind to this day. Later, a building was constructed on that site, and it was sold quite well. I think if these residents knew that the land had once been a mass grave, they would feel as uncomfortable as if they had swallowed a fly. I can't tell you where that place is, and you shouldn't inquire about the stories of the land where your neighborhood is built. Some things are better left unknown, don't you think? Well, that's the end of today's story from Lee. So everybody, please share what you think of this story and your stories. Thank you, everyone. This is Alex's story time, and I am Alex. See you next time. Bye.